My name is Harley Kiger. I got drafted in World War II in 1943, March. I went in to the service. I went to Fort Snelling, Illinois. From there, I moved around to several camps, ended up at Camp Campbell, Kentucky, which was a Armored Air Force camp. And at this camp, we knew by then that we were going to be in the Armored Division. And from there, we were there very shortly, and they needed men overseas because they were going to make the invasion. And so we didn't stay long in any one place. From there, we went to Camp Davis, North Carolina, and from Camp Davis, North Carolina, we turned in all our equipment, our clothing, got new, and so was sent up to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey. From Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, we boarded a big English boat like the Queen's. It was New Amsterdam. And all the personnel were French Moroccans. And 10 days on the sea going over. 5 days out, we saw a German sub. And we went on a zigzag course to Greenland. And at Greenland, we got Air Force guidance, and they guided us on into Glasgow, Scotland. Well, I always remember one of my memories of the New Amsterdam. As we'd go to the mess hall, whoever ended up on the end of the big mess tables had to go to the galley and get food. So this one day I happened to end up on the end of the table and went down to the galley to get food and walked into the galley, and here's a tremendous big soup kettle. And sitting up on top of the soup kettle was a big French Moroccan with just a G-string on, and he had like bicycle pedals that he was pedaling, which stirred a beater to keep the soup mixed. Well, you know, all his sweat was dripping off right down into the soup. And you know, Harley was not hungry that day. But anyway, we landed at Glasgow, Scotland, got off of the boat, got on a troop train and went down through Wales, ended up on the Salisbury Plains in England. That was where they had a Air Force base set up that was going to snatch gliders to send over across the channel. And from there we went to Straits of Dover, landed on got on these LSDs, I think they called them, and overseas. Well, we landed on Omaha Beach. From Omaha Beach, I got up on the shoreline from Omaha Beach, and my first dead soldier German soldier I saw, I removed his ammunition belt and his rifle because I didn't have one. And I carried that all the way through the war. But our great mission was the city of Brest, France, which was a big seaport. And there we needed that to get our supplies in. And I was 3rd Army, 6th Armored under Patton. So you know the story of Patton, blood and guts, we went. Many times we'd run out of supplies and gas, and we'd pull the old covered wagon trick. We'd make a circle and point all our guns outward and hope the Germans didn't know we were out of gas, and sit there till the C-47s would fly us in a supply of gas to move on. Well, from there, we went straight across France to the city of Nancy, France, which is a big airport, big city. And it was something like Duluth-Superior. Metz, Germany was right there too. But at Nancy, France, we were on the lines for 144 days, and at Nancy, France, the general told us that he was going to give us 10 days R&R. Well, in second thought, there was 2 little towns about 30 miles out, Zweitok, Germany, and he said if we captured those in 10 days, he would give us our 10-day R&R. So the troops says, let's go get these SOBs, you know. They wanted to get their 10 days, so 3 days they captured these 2 towns and got pulled back to Nancy, France, and there they served us a fresh turkey supper, mashed potatoes, gravy, all the goodies. And I said, we lived on C rations and K rations for 100 days or more, and I said, a good meal like that really tasted good, you know. But, so the captain got up and gave a little talk and told everybody, he said, okay, he said, we're going to have 10 days R&R. One thing I don't want you to do is get in trouble, get thrown in jail, because we will be moving out in 10 days. So the troops, when he said dismiss, almost made the door bigger getting out because they were on free time. And that was about like 7 o'clock in the evening. 9 o'clock in the evening, he called me into his CP tent, and he said, Kiger, sorry to tell you this, go out and round up all the troops. So I said, Captain, you want me to get shot? Well, I'm sorry, but he said, we're moving out. And he said, I know if I send you, they'll know it's coming from battalion headquarters. So I got in my Jeep and I went to all the bars and told the guys. And some of them were real put out because they already had a Fraulein on their shoulder and a few drinks ahead of them. But I asked the captain, I said, where are we going? He said, I can't tell you. He said, when we get out on the road, I'll be riding with you in the Jeep. I will tell you then. So as we were on the way, I said, where are we going? And he said, we're going to the Battle of the Bulge. He said, the Germans had broke through and we got to go help the 4th Army now. So we landed in Luxembourg and we took roll call, and at that time we were one man short. He was a cook, a sergeant in the cook's department, and I never saw him to let him know that we were moving out. But 3 days later, he met up with us in a supply line that was coming up to the Battle of the Bulge, so we were 100% again. Well, we fought the Battle of the Bulge up in the Ardennes Forest and so on, and there I made my really first contact with General Patton. They had called on me to take 18 big Sherman tanks up to the front lines. So I had my Jeep and I had a young recruit with me.
Wait a minute, you're taking German tanks to the front line?
No, American tanks to the front lines.
Oh, okay.
And we come chugging down this old gravel road, and here was an MP stopping everybody, kind of like at a crossroad. And so we sat there in these big tanks, Sherman's chugging behind me, you know, sounded like the whole world was opening up. And finally I raised up over the windshield of the Jeep and I said, soldier, will you get the hell out of my way? I want to get these tanks to the front lines. So he stepped back and waved me on. So we come up past him and got by him, and I said to the young recruit I had with me that day, I said, do you know who that was? No. I said, well, that was General Patton. I said, he said, how did you know? And I said, did you notice the pearl handle pistols? He always wore them. We got up just a little ways on the road, and there his armored vehicle set. He always had a little tank, only it was on rubber tires. And so that set pulled off in the woods. We got our tanks delivered and turned around and got out of there and got back to the CP for our next order of business to where we were going. But after we got done in Battle of the Bulge, we started out to there was a little city of Kassel, Germany. And we got out to there, and at Kassel, Germany, we kind of swung south. Our orders were to meet the Russians at the border of Czechoslovakia. So we headed south and got down there, and not much resistance, and the Germans were pretty well whipped. And got down to the Czechoslovakia border, and there was a little river there. I can't remember what the name of it was, but the Germans were all swimming the river to surrender to the U.S. troops because they didn't want to surrender to the Russians, because they figured they'd be better treated if they were under U.S. control. And so at that time, that's where we met the Germans, and I traded one of my U.S. insignias to a Russian, and he gave me one of his red stars. And from that time, then we were back to Army life again. We had to polish our combat boots that we'd been in the mud for 100 days, and an opportunity to come up for Occupation Army. Occupation Army was a group of people that got formed that took care of prisoner of war camps. So I signed up for that, and luckily I was drawn. So there you were back just in regular Army fatigues again, and so I was in Occupation Army for about 3 months, and traveled around to Nuremberg and several of the larger Frankfurt and places like that they had German prisoner of war camps, and done that, and after 3 months got called to go home. I had the first troop, a bunch of guys went home, had 100 to 90 points, and then 90 to 80 or 85. I was in the 85 and above amount of points that I had to come home, and so I got called to leave and come home. Well, then it was back across France, cattle trucks and big 6x6s and different little camps, overnight camps, and we got back to Le Havre, France, and there we boarded this little canoe, I called it. It was just a little ship that was going to bring us home. And we come out past the Rock of Gibraltar, and about the second or third day out, we hit a storm, and I'll tell you, one night the screw come right out of the water on the waves, but finally it settled down, and we sailed on across and got the word that on deck, or you're going to see the U.S. any moment now. So all the guys are up on deck searching for land, and we landed at Newport News, Virginia. From Newport News, Virginia, we went to Camp Patrick Henry. Camp Patrick Henry got on a troop train for Camp McCoy, Wisconsin.
Where was Camp Patrick Henry?
It was right in there around that Virginia area.
Okay.
Yeah. And we got on the troop train, and I think we sat in Chicago about 3 days. They couldn't get an engine to pull us out. They'd take us so far and drop you, and another engine would pick you up and take you another district. But I think we sat in Chicago tracks there for about 3 days, but we had our mess car on and everything, so everybody just stayed in the train, and you weren't allowed to leave. And finally ended up at Camp McCoy, and got our discharge and home free. So that was about my life. Got home in October of 1945. So it was a...
Now we're going to go look at some of the pictures over here that you have, and you can tell me about these items, and we'll go along.
Go to the German Iron Cross. Is the highest award that a German soldier could get. I captured a German lieutenant, and I got his Iron Cross and his pistol, which I have given to my son. All these other medals were big enough that they could be made into a weapon and held in their hand and gouge you. So they all had to be thrown in a pile, and we burnt them or buried them or whatever, but every once in a while I'd pick out one that looked different, so I'd stick it in my pocket and throw it in my duffel bag and my Jeep, and that's how I have this. Some German things made out of plastic. I said they had plastic way back in the early 40s, where the United States didn't have it until later.
Now what's unusual about this piece of money here?
It has a picture in a little slot here that if it didn't have that, it wasn't any good. You'd have to hold it up to the light, and you'd see a face in there, and it would indicate that the money was...
Now whose money is this?
That's France.
France, okay. What is this money here?
This is our money that we were paid on when we were soldiers over in Europe. This was French francs that we got paid for in American money when we were in France, and then over this here is the German marks that when we arrived in Germany that's what we were paid in, but it was the U.S. currency that was paid to us.
What are the bottom ones here?
These are some French pieces that I have. This is also French. They run from 2 francs up to 10, I guess. It's just some old German money that I took off the pile when prisoners would put their empty their pockets, so to say, to
This is German money. Look at the size of the bill compared to my hand.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Well, look at this in here. It takes, you know.
Well, look at my hand and you get a size. How'd you like to carry a wad of those in your pocket?
It's just some old German money. If you notice this one down here, it says 9 million marks. So maybe I'm a millionaire and don't know it.
And this group here?
This is German also. Now this is back to France. This is some money that we could use when we were in France. They would accept this from the American troops because it also had the pictures in it of the faces that indicated that it was a good piece.
So if I pick this up, I'll see the
You should
picture.
see faces in there, yes.
Okay, let's put it up to the light. Oh yeah, look at the pictures show up there. What's this one?
I really don't know. It's just a foreign bill that I picked up somewhere along the line. But after I got home, can I turn it?
Yep.
I find it is printed out here down by the bottom of the American Bank and Trust Company. So, the United States must have been printing something for somebody. When I was in Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, I ran into a buddy coming back from Japan. They also had invasion money that they were paid in. And this was some old Japanese money that he had picked up along the way. And so he wanted some of my German and I needed some of his Japan stuff. So we kind of made a little trade. And I also got this from him. Japan was going to be the dominant country ruler of the world, and this money here they had already printed and they'd buried it in the Sea of Japan. And it almost looks like our money, but
Why'd they bury it?
I don't know. After the U.S. government dug it up, they put holes in it so that, you know, but they
Turn it around.
these two pieces here were,
Which two?
these two in the middle here were good currency for the Germans, yet the German towns and stores were accepting this when we were there. They would rather have this than our invasion money. So if you had some of that, you could
What's the two at the bottom?
that I don't know, just something that somebody threw in a pile and I
Took it.
you know. This here is a piece of parachute from gas drop when we get surrounded and have no gas to operate. This was his piece of parachute that they come down on a drop and so we went and got our gas and everybody took a little piece of souvenir of the parachute. I did too. I thought it was kind of interesting. So.
Now, what are these cards?
Well, I had a buddy that we'd put our name in a hat and they'd draw it out, and one of the guys, his name got drawn out, got a chance to go to Paris. So my buddy got a chance to go to Paris, so I said, Pete, bring me back a souvenir. So he brought me this little Eiffel Tower and this deck of playing cards, which is kind of different than ours. And
What do you have in your hand?
when I landed at Omaha Beach, there was a bunch of these seashells that had floated up onto the shoreline. So there's so much difference in them. I grabbed a couple and stuck them in my hip pocket. I guess they call them lion's paw. But it's still got some of the gravel and dirt on it from Omaha Beach. It's still there. So.
How many days after the invasion did you hit Omaha Beach?
I think it was 7 days from the main invasion that we got across the channel and landed on Omaha Beach.
Where'd you go from there in Omaha?
From Omaha Beach, we went ashore and then we headed for the city of Brest, France, because that was a big seaport and we needed it to get our supplies in. And then from there, we just took off across France. And Patton said we just keep going and we get what we can get. So.
What do you have in your hand there?
This is a German mess kit. This is what they used. Well, I befriended a German soldier in a prisoner of war camp that I was guarding, and one day I was smoking a cigarette, and he said, "Oh, a cigarette." I said, "You want a cigarette?" "Oh, yeah." So I gave him one of my cigarettes, and he puffed that down in a hurry, and he said, "I have to make you something." So he said, "Bring me a nail." So I brought him a nail, and he engraved all this with just a nail, and that was my gift from him. Well, the only thing I can tell on there, it says 1945, I can read that, but I did have a teacher over in Deer River school system who did get it translated from German to English, so it tells you what it says on it, but it's quite a piece of work for just a nail.
Okay, what am I looking at here?
It's a Hitler's youth knife. All the youth kids that were put in service got one of these knives. That was their piece of weapon. These others up in the Black Forest, up in the Battle of the Bulge, all the Germans, you always know they wore those big leather boots. Well, they just didn't have guns. You wanted to pull their boots off because they all had one of these knives in their boots. So make sure you tuck their boot off and remove their knives.
What's the big one?
This is a paratrooper's knife. It had a
ours or theirs?
Theirs. And the blade on the end here, it went in, and that was this was just an officer's little bayonet sword that I got, German.
Okay.
This is just a decoration off it. But this is a box of shrapnel. You've heard of shrapnel. That's shrapnel.
I see you got some M1 shells there, it look like.
These are German.
German?
This is a U.S. 50 caliber that I picked up and just kept for a souvenir. This was a German artillery compass that you could, the dial circulates, you could tip this down, you could see the thing in here and sight to it. It has a little sight there that you sight. That was a German artillery compass. I don't know, they must be 16 foot long, isn't it, David?
Yeah, pretty dang close, huh?
Where'd the flag come from?
Came from a little town in France that we liberated, and it was hanging on the building as we entered this town. And so I told a young fellow that was with me that day, I said, I want that flag. So he said, how are we going to get it, Corporal? And I said, well, when we contact the burgomaster and get all that business done, we'll go back and cut it down. And that's what we did. So I wrote it up so that my Jeep brought it. Okay. The black on this flag is printed onto the white, and then the white ring is sewed onto the red. But it was, it's about 16 feet long. They hung from the rooftops down, but it's, that's just an armband that the Germans wore around their arm.
What's something printed on there?
Yeah, it's a little swastika, you know, and I don't know what it says on there, but it's in German, but it,
how do they fasten it to the arms?
They just had them around their arm, and with a, I suppose they had a pin of some kind that they brought them together and tied them and everything, and they wore them on their arms. This is one of their shoulder patches that they had, and this is ours that I had. I was in 6th Armored Division, but I came home in the 9th Armored Division because the 6th Armored wasn't sending anybody home. And on my point system, I had to be transferred, so they transferred me into the 9th Armored Division to come home with. And so that's why I have a patch of the 9th as well.
Okay, what is...
This was the outer fence around Buchenwald, and we just used our Sherman tank with our bulldozer blade and bulldozed it down. Well, this is what we found when we got into the camp, the people. And then out on the other side of the camp was...
Why don't we go back to here? What is this?
This is the inner part of Buchenwald. And then these are the incineraries where they burnt the bodies. They had a big pile of bodies like this piled up out in the back there that we just took the Sherman tanks with the bulldozer blades and dug a trench, rolled them in. It was about the only thing we could do.
Were there any prisoners alive then?
Oh yeah, there's some prisoners here, if you noticed on that one. There are people walking around there.
Okay. And what's this for?
That's the incinerary where they burnt the bodies up. This is the ovens that they threw the bodies in and would burn the bodies up. Then they had this pile of bodies thrown up in a heap.
What's this down here?
That was the Rhine River. That's where the Germans blew the bridge across the Rhine River.
What is this?
These were pictures of the day the war was declared over. We found a little German brewery and got a keg of beer. We were gathered there having a beer. The pictures are all different sizes because when we have the burgomaster bring in all the cameras and everything.
What's a burgomaster?
The burgomaster is the mayor. Okay. Same as the mayor. In German, he's known as the burgomaster. So as he'd have all these cameras brought in, and before I'd throw them in the fire, I'd look, and if they had film, I'd put them in my Jeep and use the film up and throw them in the next fire I'd come to. So that's how my pictures are all different sizes and shapes. And that's just outside of one of the places we were at, one of the guys sitting in one of the Jeeps. These two little kids, I found on the road one day, their house was just over in the sideway. It got hit with an artillery shell and was blown up. Their mother and dad was killed, and they were just wandering. So I picked them up and took them back to the interrogators, and I don't know.
This is German kids, I see.
German kids, yeah.
Okay.
Took them to where they could be taken care of properly. These pictures are of a German airport that we captured. And the Germans had the planes there, but they didn't have any fuel to fly them, so they just took a hammer and broke the instruments out. So they even have one of ours that they had captured that they were painting over their swastikas on. So,
I mean, this one here?
These are, yeah, this one here is a B-47.
And they put the swastika on.
Yeah, they captured it from us, and so they're fixing it up, putting their signatures on it and all that, you know.
What is this?
These are just in someplace in France that we captured a big railroad yard, and the bombs they had their ties, but they had metal caps over the ties. Well, the bomb crater hit in here, and it just tipped the rails, the tops of those caps off the ties, just tipped them up. This one down here, this is a German 88 there. That's famous.
Where? Which one?
This one here. It's one of the German 88s that they used to, was their heavy artillery piece. This is the day I received my Bronze Star. As the general there was handing them out, and these guys all were receivers. But here again, my pictures are different colors because we had a lieutenant that worked in a camera store in New York before he came in, and he got the chemicals for us to develop our pictures. Well, you leave them in the chemicals too long and they turn out dark, but I know what they are and everything. Just a group of these are just our guys. They captured this little flag, and so they all dressed up for me one day, and I was there and I took a picture. This was the French Maginot Line here. This guy got to go back in France, so he took that picture, or had somebody take it of him and give it to me for a souvenir. But we weren't getting any fresh meat, so I told the captain, I said, I'm from Minnesota, I shot many deer as a kid, and I said, how about shooting some of those deer that I see out in the field? He said, what are you going to do with them? I said, bring them in for stew or whatever. So he gave me permission to go ahead and get a couple of them. So that was one of the ones that I got. Some of my friends, I was getting ready to come home, so we got a bottle of wine and all got on the front of my Jeep and had a little toast saying we were coming home. That's a cemetery on Omaha Beach now that the U.S. government made, and I have a nephew in Germany that brought me that picture, so it means a lot to me because I landed there in Omaha Beach. This is our prisoner of war camp that the gentleman made me the mess kit for. And this is our tent city, and this was where we had our hardcore. This was kind of a stockade that we had there that we guarded.
Was there a fence around this thing?
This one was. This just had a wire stretched around it, and these guys, all that was in this one, tent city, they just guys that wanted to go home. The war was over, you know. They wanted to go home to their families. I was taking 2 lieutenants back to come home, and as we was driving on the road, we ran into this Bob Hope show. They were setting it up out in the middle of a big field to entertain the troops. He was there, and so we got a chance to watch it for a little while, and we had to keep going because these guys were on a schedule. And this was down at Le Havre. This is how they transported the troops from the base, which was here, down to where the ship was at. They just had big cattle trucks, and they'd run you in there, and you just stood in there with your baggage and rode down to the ship's landing and boarded the ship there. This was at Le Havre. They had this big pyramidal tent. It was like a hangar, but they had movies on there all day long for the troops to go and watch.
And where was that located?
Le Havre, France. It was down on the seaport where we were getting ready to come home. That was General Patton's cross over in his grave over in Europe. He wanted to be buried where his troops were. So
where was he buried at? What town?
I can't remember.
Oh, okay.
This is a 50 caliber machine gun shell that I picked up just for a souvenir. But in 1944, the U.S. government had a detail that picked up all the brass that they could find on the battlefield, and it was shipped back to the United States, and that's what your 1944 Lincoln penny, wheat penny, is made out of. So if you ever see a 1944 penny, you know it come off of the battlefield over in France.
From the brass?
From the brass, yeah.
What do you have here?
I said I have 3 $1 bills that I have always when I go to the schools. It's kind of my warmer up to the kids.
Yeah.
There's 3 U.S. bucks, but some silver certificates and all that. But I pass this around to the kids to have them kind of look it over. Well, the difference is,
let me get in here.
This one does not have "In God We Trust" on it.
Which one?
Back in 1935, the Secretary of the Treasury didn't believe in God, so he had "In God We Trust" taken off of all the money. But the kids really get charged up with this and have a good time, you know. Get warmed up. The rest of them all have "In God We Trust" on them.